now go to Ms. Oates, please.
Yes, hello, good morning. Dear Senators, thank you for inviting me to address you today regarding the dire and worsening situation in Afghanistan. There, nearly the entire population is food insecure. 15 million out of 43 million people depend on humanitarian assistance in order to eat. Unemployment is rising exponentially. An earthquake struck the western province of Herat on October 11th, followed by a second quake on October 15th, which together have killed an estimated 2,000 people and injured 1,800. The first earthquake destroyed several villages completely, flattening some 25,000 buildings. Survivors have been left homeless just as the colder weather is intensifying. In the short time I have, my main message is to emphasize that these humanitarian challenges cannot be understood in isolation from the country's human rights challenges, including its system of gender apartheid. The earthquake is just one case in point. Over 90% of those killed were women and children. Women were, of course, confined to their homes, not allowed to work or pursue higher education, and girls over grade 6 are not allowed to go to school. The country's economic crisis has driven many men to become migrant workers over the border in Iran. Many child survivors of the earthquake had their mothers killed, but their fathers outside the country. Similarly, we see the economic consequences of the Taliban's discriminatory policies exacting its heaviest price from girls. Bride prices, even at the low end, are typically thousands of dollars and can constitute the single largest amount of funds a family can gain in one transaction. So as poverty increases, child marriage increases. Per the latest data, on average, 1 in 3 girls is married before the age of 18, and in some provinces, half of girls are married before 18. 15% are under 15. Mariam Safi, who leads an Afghan research organization that recently conducted a study on child marriage there, is quoted as saying, "There is a clear link between the return of the Taliban in 2021 and the increase in child marriage, especially in urban centers, where since 2 decades ago, there had been an evolution and families no longer felt they had to marry off their daughters as soon as possible because girls were getting opportunities to work and study and were also contributing financially to the household. Now," she says, "the Taliban harass them and the parents become afraid that a Taliban will take their daughter to make her his wife, so they prefer to marry them off to anyone first." The education situation continues to deteriorate, with several new restrictions announced over the summer, including the demand that education activities supported by international NGOs be handed over before the end of this year, and the closing of girls' schooling past grade 3 in some areas. On the other hand, I can report that by our count, there are over 100 virtual schools operating and at least that many in-person schools, still providing education to women and girls. These independent efforts may be the country's best hope for girls' and women's education, and we are calling for support to assist this growing community of learning providers to form into an independent education system in exile for those who cannot rely on the state to provide them an education. I would also like to mention another concern related to education, which is the Taliban's overhaul of the basic education curriculum. They have been explicit about their intention to rewrite textbooks to reflect their ideology, including by their own account, to propagate violence, condemn tolerance and pluralism, and the West. Secular subjects like the sciences will be gutted. Aside from the implications for learning outcomes among boys and girls, a militant Islamist terrorist group mobilizing the curriculum explicitly to seek to indoctrinate several million children and youth to embrace and act out a violent ideology ought to be of profound concern to those concerned with the prevention of terrorist violence in the future. Poverty, joblessness, the lack of educational opportunities, the suppression of rights, and the threats to girls and the family are among the reasons driving Afghans to attempt to leave the country. The UNHCR estimates there are 7.9 million Afghans displaced in neighboring countries, a number which we can expect to continue to grow. This does not include Afghans displaced beyond the region, including hundreds of thousands in Turkey. Very few of these people have refugee status, and very many are so-called illegal migrants. Even the small minority of people lucky enough to have opportunities to get to other countries still have to pass through Pakistan to get there, requiring enormous visa fees and exposure to many layers of corruption, an enormous financial burden on families that have already often lost jobs, homes, and assets. At the beginning of this month, Pakistan's government said that 1.73 million Afghans there who lack legal documentation have until November 1st to leave voluntarily or face deportation, as well as the confiscation of their property and assets. They announced a tip line will open for people to inform on suspected undocumented Afghans. Already, we have heard from Afghan women who have had housing leases canceled by landlords in Pakistan or who have been evicted at short notice because of this situation. There are many Afghans in Pakistan seeking a durable solution in another country or whose cases are already in process, including to Canada, but who are at risk of being deported back to Afghanistan, where some of them will be at extreme risk of detention, torture, sexual violence, and death because they worked for the previous government, armed forces, collaborated with NATO, or are known to have dissented against the current regime. We have even heard of deportations of Afghans holding valid visas. As a foreign aid donor to Pakistan, Canada must speak up about this egregious violation of international norms when it comes to the protection of refugees. I will close by saying that it is well established that tragedies impacting significant numbers of people are often less likely to draw empathy because we can't easily see the human story behind the statistics. But I ask you for a moment to try to see it. The 10-year-old told she's going to marry a 50-year-old to leave her childhood home, her siblings, her mother, her dolls behind, and all that she will endure from that moment onwards. The 16-year-old thinking about suicide because she can't continue her high school education, can't dream about going to university, about the career she had once hoped to have. And all of the parents who want a better future for their children, but are literally trapped in an increasingly dystopian and dangerous situation because few doors are open to them to leave. These are the stories behind the numbers, and more than our empathy, they need our concerted action. Thank you.